Hello everyone and welcome to Talking Business with Danny Pardo. On this episode I get the pleasure of talking business with Conor. And Conor is the Managing Director of Not Going to Uni. And if you haven't heard of Not Going to Uni, how have you not heard of Not Going to Uni? It's absolutely everywhere. And we're going to be talking about alternatives to the traditional university way of education. So we'll be talking a lot about apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships, and work-based learning and the importance of it, which if you know anything about me, you'll know that that's a subject I'm very passionate about both personally and professionally. So without further ado, let's go. Let's talk business with Conor. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Business with Danny Pardo. We are chatting to Conor today from Not Going to Uni. So if that's something you've never heard of before, by the time we get to the end of this, you will know all about it. You know all about Conor. So hello, Conor. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really well, really well. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. We spoke briefly, kind of pre-recording, how passionate I am about what you do at Not Going to Uni. So I'm looking forward to diving deep into that and what you've been up to and what's coming next for you. But before we get there, who are we speaking to today? Who is Conor?
Yeah. So I'm actually only 22, which is always the biggest shock when people chat to me. So 22, and I'm the managing director of Not Going to Uni, which still feels a bit weird when I say it, given my age and my youthful nature.
Putting the words managing director and 22-year-old, they don't normally go very well together. So
no, they don't. But you know, it was something I always knew from when I sort of got into the business sphere, so to speak, of working full time. I knew I wanted to work my way up the food chain quite quickly. I became quite driven. Success financially, there were a number of things different that sort of drove me to want to succeed, and one of those things was I wanted to run my own company, or run a company quite quickly. That opportunity, I actually started my career at Not Going to Uni a few years ago. When I left school, I was a junior salesperson, fresh out of school, didn't even understand really what selling was, to be honest with you. It was probably, well, no, not probably, I was quite naive to the industry, to sales. A lot of people were going, you don't want to go into sales, mate. You know, it was that attitude. But actually found out I could sell. I think the big thing is I can talk to people. I've always been quite confident in myself. I've always quite enjoyed talking to people. When I was in school, I always had part-time jobs that were client-facing, customer-facing, whether it was in retail or hospitality. So pivoting to sales actually kind of worked, fit my skill set, worked my way up quite quickly, left for a couple of years to go and work at SpringPod, which I went into SpringPod when it was just received their seed funding, I think it was. So really startup stage. And I basically did a MBA. I basically did a business degree at SpringPod for 18 months, 2 years. Because working in a startup, and if there's any young people watching, I 100% recommend at some point work for a startup, because you're in an environment where you learn so much. You know, you're sat in an office with the founders of the business, with the tech team, listening to conversations about raising Series A investment, about accounting procedures, about marketing procedures, and so on. And then obviously came back to Not Going to Uni initially as commercial director, and then after 9 months transition to take over from the existing MD. And actually, you know, I'm quite thankful for that time I had. My first time Not Going to Uni, my time at SpringPod, because what it did was it gave me that grounding of lots of different areas, which I've been able to then bring to Not Going to Uni, and you know, achieve the success we have achieved in 10 months now.
Yeah, because very interesting what you say there about working for a startup, because if you work for a large organization, you are not going to get to sit in on those meetings, are you? And people are spread all over the place. But when you've got a startup, it is everybody in the same room. People are often doing 2 or 3 roles. Very rarely you might not have separate departments. There won't be a 20 people strong HR team or marketing team, and everybody's together. And you got the chance to learn from everybody all at once. And you said an important thing there. You said when I left school. So was there no college involved here? Are we skipping the A-level BTEC route?
Yeah, so I did do A-levels. So apologies, my fault. When I said finish school, when I finished sixth form, but my secondary school and my sixth form were the same place.
Gotcha.
So I went straight into. Never really looked at. I did look at a couple of options, but never really wanted to go down the FE college route. I kind of call myself semi-academic, is the way I describe myself in school. The subjects I was really passionate about, I excelled in. And I was also quite good at things like English. I don't know. I think it's because I read a lot, and I read a lot as a kid, and my parents always pushed me to read. But then other subjects, when I wasn't interested, when it didn't spark something inside of me, I just didn't try, to be quite honest with you. And that's, again, any young people watching, don't use that as advice.
It's too late. You've said it now. That's going to be the same like from the advert.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast and some guy said I don't need to try if I don't like the subject. But
simple as.
It all worked out. It all worked out okay. But I was semi-academic, but I always thought sixth form was the right pathway for me. I was obviously staying with my friendship group, with my circle and everything else. So went on to do A-levels. When I went to do A-levels, though, my A-levels don't really correlate to what I'm doing now, because I did double BTEC level 3, it would have been, sport. So 2 of my options were that. And one of them was media studies. And I guess you could say with media studies, there's some similarities, but not loads. Didn't do business, didn't do economics, didn't do a lot of things people assume I would have done. I didn't do, because I was quite big on sport. I did my FA level 1 coaching badge. I was doing a lot of football coaching and things like this. So anyway, so I went through sixth form, did do my UCAS application. Our school said we had to do our UCAS application, even though in theory you don't. But from the school's perspective, it's a stat. If they can say that 100% of students that applied for university at least got offers, it's a great stat as a sales story. I actually rejected those offers just because I looked at the market, I looked at people I knew, and actually I knew a lot of people that went to university and some of them were just unemployed. And I was like, so there's no guarantees here. And then a lot of people, namely one of my brother, for example, and a number of other people, didn't go to universities and were soaring. So I was like, hold on. So there's no science here really behind you guaranteed success with university and you guaranteed success without. It's kind of, I think it's down to the individual. So took the pathway of deciding to reject my offers and, go into the big bad world.
And you're also not guaranteed there to the subject that you study when you're 17, 18, that will be your life as well. I mean, I presume 100%. That there was pressure on you, or maybe not pressure, but certainly maybe expectations, maybe even in your own head that sport will be what you do for the rest of your life.
Oh,
and now you don't.
100%. And, my dad's a PE teacher, so obviously sport was definitely big in his mind. And a lot of his family are quite sporty, and I grew up around football and coaching, this and this and this. So there's not direct pressure like you have to go into a sport career, but you put pressure on yourself because you're in that environment and because of the people you mix around and all these kind of things. But thankfully, I've always had parents that kind of let me make my own mistakes, if you know what I mean, and let me make my own decisions, and whether they're right or wrong, they'll support them. When it comes to sort of my career pathway, thankfully it's been a lot of rights. But that's the one thing I'm glad that no one's ever said, right, I'm a PE teacher, so you have to be a PE teacher. Or, if my mom was a dentist, she says you have to be a dentist. It's never been like that.
And you seem to be very happy in this role at not going to uni. It seems to match with what you believe in by the sounds of it. But for people who don't know, what is not going to uni? And I see the initials NGTU all over LinkedIn and Twitter and things like that. So in case anybody's thinking, how is this all matching up? So what is not going to uni and why should we check it out?
Yeah, so not going to uni has actually had a lot of change in the last 10 months, it's safe to say. So at its core, Not Going to Uni is a website for school and college leavers to discover their future career. So we will work with major organisations who utilise Not Going to Uni to, promote and advertise their apprenticeships, gap years, first year jobs, traineeships, things like that. the website's been going 15 years. It was one of the first, if not the first, sort of site of its kind on the market. 15 years ago, the idea of degree apprenticeship was a twinkle in someone's eye. But what we've actually changed to be now is we are an end-to-end recruitment marketing agency for clients wanting to engage with Gen Z and younger. One of the my brief basically from a business perspective when I came in was the business is plateauing. We'd only ever done the same thing. We only ever had the job board. And it was how can we change that? How can we grow the business again? And my model that was we need to position ourselves as a recruitment marketing agency that knows how to contact and not contact, but contact's part, but engage with this audience that you want to hire. So the businesses have been pillared. You've got NGTU Social, NGTU Create, NGTU Recruit. And we've also recently launched our influencer agency, Inspire. So working with careers influencers to push out opportunities. So we've turned into quite a big machine now in terms of what we do. But for those transactional kind of users looking for a job, they can go on the Not Going to Uni website, go and apply for roles on the job board. They can follow us on social and engage in our content. We have ambassadors who are doing apprenticeships or gap years or first year jobs who share their stories through our social and everything else. What I'm passionate about, because I've been in that position. I think that's why it resonates so much. I'm the age I am. I started my career at Not Going to Uni. I didn't go to university despite having my authors. And I've been in that position of actually going, what do I do? And kind of winging it a bit. So I'm really passionate about us putting out information and supporting young people in as many ways possible, whether that's something simple like a piece of social content, or whether that's, an in-depth guide, or whether that's having our, job listings available, or whatever that may be.
Yeah, and I think what you said there with regards to your age and you've been there and done it, there's the perception that if you are managing director that you've done 20 years in that business before you even get a sniff at a job like that. But your age, 22, you're not far removed from the people who are making these decisions and the people you're interacting
100%.
with. So your age, would you say that's been a definite advantage for you then in terms of kind of hitting into and being able to engage with people who were maybe only, say, 3 or 4 years younger than you, or even the same age as you, I would presume?
Yeah, we need to, at the end of the day, we're an organisation focused on marketing to young people. So it makes sense to have young people or younger people at the helm. It resonates more from a client's perspective. They understand it. From an outside perspective, they understand it. There's a lot of great benefits, and I've got my ear to the ground as well because I'm not a million miles away from doing that journey or having done that journey. And then we've got people like our ambassadors who then help that as well and everything else. So I want us to be a young organisation. I want us to be a youth-centric organisation at the end of the day. I don't want people to look at us and think we're a middle-aged, male-dominated organisation. I want us to actually be seen as that young, youthful organisation that we should be.
And that feel comes across. I've watched some of your Instagram live chats, and it's people that young people can really resonate with and connect with, who are going through the same thing as them, who look the same as them, the same as them, and have the similar experiences to them. And that's really showing up in what Not Going to Uni does. And it's amazing to say you've been around for 15 years, right at the start of my teaching career. And you said, degree apprenticeships back then, if you'd said what they were, people would have probably laughed you off the streets, wouldn't they? And I've seen them grow, and I've seen some of my past students go on and do them and be massively successful and massively happy doing them, that they've made the right choice. So what trends have you been seeing, say, since you've been there in the last year or two? Obviously, the pandemic has changed a lot of things. But what trends are you seeing with regards to apprenticeships, traineeships, and things like that?
Yeah, obviously the elephant in the room is the pandemic. If anyone sat there thinking, did the pandemic affect? Yes, is the long and short answer. Employers pulled their job roles quicker than they could blink because they, the people hiring didn't even know if they had jobs, let alone hiring more young people. Yeah. Say with a pinch of salt, some industries, your AstraZenecas, your GSKs, and some of the engineering firms and so on, still recruited. I think we're going to see quite a big shift in terms of the types of apprenticeships on offer. There's just been a big, I say a big announcement. The head of apprenticeships at Co-op's just done an announcement about their HGV apprenticeship scheme they're going to be running. I want to say it's about 300 apprentices they're looking to hire, there or thereabouts, because of obviously reacting to what's happened. Again, something I don't think people would have ever thought would have been an opportunity. So there's going to be a lot of, because of Brexit, because of the pandemic, because of different things going on in our economy and so on, I think we're going to see an introduction of a lot of new roles that we maybe never considered. I think the long and short is, bar sort of becoming a doctor and things like this, there's going to be an apprenticeship for most careers in some guys. There already is in some ways. For some careers, it's a bit 50-50. But that's the way we're going, is that a lot of people still make the common misconception. They go, well, to be a solicitor or a lawyer, you need to go to university. And it's like, well, actually, you don't, because there's a solicitor apprenticeship scheme. In fact, some of our ambassadors are solicitor apprentices, and they're working on cases that a qualified solicitor would work on, that's had 15, 20 years experience. So I think that's going to keep happening, that innovation. The Institute of Aeronautical and Space and all that kind of stuff announced their space-based apprenticeship scheme, which is really cool. Astronaut apprenticeship, like, nice. You know, this is the kind of, this is what I mean. People still have that misconception that, okay, for 90% of careers, there's not an apprenticeship scheme, and apprenticeships are only for manual, electrician, plumber, things like this. But actually,
that was exactly my next question. The image of apprenticeships, say 5-10 years ago, apprenticeships are, oh, you want to be an apprentice? Oh, you must want to work in construction, because that's all you can do with an apprenticeship. And it's fascinating, you know, the words that you're using here, aerospace apprenticeships. I mean, you imagine saying that 5-10 years ago, people, again, it just wouldn't have happened. And also hearing about Co-op, you know, 300 apprenticeships. I think there's always been, from my perception from the education side, that there's 1 or 2 apprenticeships here and there, maybe as a tick box exercise for an organisation to say they've done it, to meet a quota. And it's great to see that is not the case, that apprenticeships are a really valued part of organisations and organisation growth, and these new roles that didn't exist 2 years ago. And they need young people with their ideas to fill them. So it's fascinating to see that. And are you still seeing that? Do you think we're at the start of that, and there's going to be a lot more of that coming in the next year or two?
Yeah, I think, like I said, the effects of Brexit, the effects of the pandemic, the effects of the economy, and all these variable factors that chop and change daily will have an impact on the landscape. We're seeing that with, like I said, the Co-op thing. We saw that during the pandemic with the increase in certain roles and decreasing in others. Hospitality and catering sector, we haven't even mentioned that. Massive sector, huge recruiter of people, massive staff shortage at the moment. They're going to continue to try and plug those gaps with young people, not just part-time workers. I think there's a misconception. People might go, oh, what part-time workers? No, apprentices, front of house apprentices, chef apprentices, housekeeper apprentices, you know, all these different career pathways. So the market will react. There'll also be some innovation in terms of career pathways we don't even know exist. You know, at the end of the day, thinking of jobs for the future, you know, if you said even 2 years ago there's an apprenticeship and you work on, I don't know, robotics, people go, oh, I don't know about that. But that you know, a lot of this change will happen as things innovate. Obviously, the caveat is, as I don't know if you saw that GB News interview I did, there was a record number of university offers that were made this year. But then again, you kind of expect that when the number of job roles on the market dipped so much when they were applying. When you had the option of UCAS and apprenticeships, there was loads of UCAS stuff you could apply for, not that many apprenticeships. So it's a given that's going to happen. But I'm really confident that eventually they'll almost level out and they'll be 50-50, if not, hopefully. I'm not saying uni's great for certain people and it's great for certain career pathways, but actually I do think that one day apprenticeships might be, a bit like in countries like Germany, might be the flagship opportunity and pathway for students.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be great that students are aware of what's out there? Because I've always found that students just didn't know. They didn't even know degree apprenticeships existed, or they were still battling the stigma of, but I don't want to be a bricklayer. And what you're doing is really breaking down those barriers to it. A question that just come to mind, but I didn't prep you for, but I'm sure you'll be able to answer it.
Yeah.
With regards to the perception of apprenticeships, traineeships, and things like that, is it a nationwide? Is there a nationwide demand for them? Obviously, certain industries are based in certain areas of the country. I understand that, but is there a perception that you're only going to get the good apprenticeships in London because that's where all the good office jobs are, or things like that? Or are you working on a real national basis with not going to uni?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely working on a national basis. I mean, funny enough, I was talking to a colleague the other day, and we were laughing about there was a software developer for like an SME in literally the middle of nowhere. I mean, the middle of nowhere. But in terms of the role, it was the same as being a software developer at Google. Like, the salary was the same, the opportunity was the same, and blah, blah. The only difference was you don't work for Google, you work for an SME. But we were laughing because we were like, there's generally opportunities everywhere. And some of the opportunities are amazing. Like, there's, obviously, you're always going to have a concentration in Bristol, London, Leeds, Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh. That's a given because they're so populated with businesses, especially the big corporates. But people forget SMEs hire apprentices, SMEs hire first-year jobbers, which aren't an apprentice, but you go in straight from work. There's so much opportunity out there, regardless of where you live. That shouldn't be a factor. And obviously you've got to consider as well that with the pandemic, the effects on how you work is also going to change. Obviously with apprenticeships, it's a bit of a interesting debate because obviously young people going into the world of work, they want to have that face time with the employer. They want to get them in that working environment, but employers also know that the way of working is changing. So they need to, and I think there's still that argument and employers are still deciding how that looks long-term for a school leaver at 18, or even remember 16, some apprentices going at 16. What do they do? Is it a blended working from home in the office approach? And how does that work? So all these things allow young people access at the end of the day. So location hopefully should never be a deal breaker in deciding not to do an apprenticeship or not go to university.
Fantastic. And that would be great for young people everywhere to be aware of that. But just because you're not literally living in a city centre doesn't mean that what we're talking about today doesn't apply to you. And there's a lot of opportunity out there, which is great. And in terms of opportunity, I mean, the government have, over the years, there's been a lot of different schemes and ways to get people involved in apprenticeships and to get businesses on the side of them as well and break down the perception from their side. So things like your Kickstarter, your Build Back Better, there was an increased levy this year that's continuing now till January, I believe, the £3,000 for businesses. Have you seen those make a real impact on apprenticeships with regards to government initiatives? And do you think they will continue to do those in the future?
Yeah, I think we definitely saw in terms of a trend from the business perspective, in terms of clients working and not going to uni. After Rishi released his budget back in, April, March time, when it usually gets released, that's when the kind of spike of new business started again. I'm assuming that was I don't know, clients haven't downright said yet that was the reason, but a hell of a lot of his budget was around supporting young people, apprenticeships, traineeships. There was a big portion of that budget about supporting young people. And then it coincided that then all of a sudden this influx of activity started. So there was definitely a positive effect on the market. What I hope is that continues. What you don't want is a big spike. And everyone goes, yeah, great. I can make lots of money back from the government on this. And then, if and when those schemes end, they stop. Because then that kind of defeats the object in my eyes, because the whole idea is you help young people. And it's not just a case of doing it because you're getting $3 or $4 grand. It's actually, right, we're getting some money back, fine, pays for advertising, pays for this, pays for that, pays for, their expenses, whatever, but pays for a little bit of their salary. But actually, even when that ends, they should see the value in continuing to invest in young people as an employer. Yeah,
and to bring those young people in. Young people are always going to be here. And you can't, if you're a business and you're only planning for the next 6 months or a year, then you're missing a trick to get talented, really enthusiastic young people in on apprenticeships would be,
Yeah,
it's a bonus, isn't it, for organisations, and that it's something
there's
that
a
they
lot
should be
of
thinking about.
there's a lot of industries you've got to remember where the workforce is aging. There's a number of industries where the average age of employees is high. The amount of people going on to retirement is high. So you don't want to keep hiring in that end of career bracket, because it's only just going to keep going around in a circle that every 5 years you've got massive turnover problems. Whereas then plugging those gaps with young talent that you can nurture and continue throughout their careers hopefully nullifies that. And funny enough, I remember going back to Co-op, Danny at Co-op, who I've mentioned, the head of apprenticeships, we were talking about their funeral care division. Now, funeral care isn't necessarily very attractive. He said it's hard to make that industry 100% attractive, but it's an aging workforce. It's a massively aging workforce for them. There's not many, if any, young people. They have a couple and they put them on a pedestal, but they need to fuel the fire for young people in the co-op funeral care industry, because otherwise they've got the same problem. You're constantly turning over people that work for 2-3 years at the very end of their career, or they're semi-retired and so on. And that's a prime example. So employers need to strategically think about those things and go, right, okay, if we can bring young people in, hopefully we've got them for longer, and we get rid of those issues we faced.
And like you say, doing things for longer. I mean, not going to uni isn't going anywhere by the looks of it. You're going from strength to strength with some of the things you were talking about there. What's next for NGT Youth? And as we go forward the next 6 months to a year, do you have anything you're allowed to announce yet? Or are you going to be continuing to grow organically like we've seen the past 6 months, 12 months or so?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some really cool conversations, especially with this sort of agency model we pivoted to. We're in conversations with a couple of clients where we'll actually ultimately be becoming the end-to-end agency, and which will be some pretty big contracts for us as a business. Some of the biggest, if not the biggest, we'll have ever closed, which is amazing. Just shows the value and the understanding that in terms of product market fit, and in business. I'm talking to an ex-business teacher who probably has spoken about product market fit a lot in his career. Is so important, and we've proven that in 10 months that we've got product market fit and there's demand. We're going to continue to grow. I have no doubts about it. My attitude is there's a lot of people in the early career space. I don't worry about what competitors do. Don't worry about what organization. I just worry about us and our growth. We lead from the front is my attitude, and we'll continue to do that. And we'll continue to make a lot of noise doing it as well. More importantly, that's, I'm really passionate about what we do, and I'm passionate about making as much noise as possible whilst we do it, because that has ample benefits. Funny enough, I got a call with someone the other day, and they started the call, didn't even say, "Hi, how are you?" They went, "I see you everywhere." They were like, "You're literally, I can't get rid of you." They're like, "I go on Google, I find you. I go on social, I find you. I go on my LinkedIn, you're there."
This is what I said to you before LinkedIn, wasn't it? But I'm seeing all the initials all over the shop.
Yeah, and that's great. That's what we want to hear, at the end of the day. So we're going to continue. This year we should have a really strong financial year for us as a business, which is great. Next year we should see another 20-30% growth on top of that, and there and out. And I've got a great team behind me, a team that's going to grow as well, for sure. We have a core team of people employed by not going to uni, and then an extended team of freelancers and contractors that work for us as well, who are fantastic, and that will keep growing, especially as the business keeps growing and obviously the revenue keeps growing. So yeah, it's an exciting time. It feels like I'm strapped to a rocket ship at the moment.
Non-stop, isn't it, now for you? That's amazing. And 20-30% growth, there's going to be a lot of businesses would be very envious of that in this current economic climate. So that is not to be sniffed at all, is it?
For sure, yeah.
So as we roll up, I'm going to ask you two more questions. What I haven't really prepped you for them, but hey, you're doing amazing. So the next one, and I know you can answer this, is for people who have watched this, for young people who have watched this or listened to this, and they're still going, yeah, but university is like, that's what we do in our family, or this is what I'm supposed to do. Why should a young person choose an apprenticeship?
How long's a piece of string? The
About 2 or 3 minutes.
I mean, the one thing you've got to remember is you go to university, you pay for the qualification. Let's say you want to do a degree. Let's say you want to do accounting at university. You can do an accounting degree apprenticeship. Your degree's paid for. You get a salary. You get the same qualification. Oh, and you're also 3 years ahead of everyone with your job. I know this sounds really, really kind of blasé, but in my eyes, it's a bit of a no-brainer when you put it as simply as that. If you can find your degree you want as a degree apprenticeship, and you realise your degree's free, there's no debt, you get paid. Plus, you probably go to a decent firm, and you get 3 years of work experience, which puts you hugely ahead of your peers. What's the question? Do you know what I mean? Like it does bode that kind of attitude of, well, what's the difference? I think, and the other thing just to mention is parents are still the biggest problem in that debate. And the more we can do to educate parents, the better, because they will often be the reason, not all the time, but a fair amount of the time, that a child goes down that university route. And that it shouldn't be like that. I said it at the end of my GB News interview, and I'll say it again now. Whatever a young person decides to do, support them in that. You shouldn't be going, oh well, I wanted to gloat to Aunt Sandra that you went to university, and you should be gloating to Aunt Sandra that you're working at EY as an accountancy apprentice, because that's cool, that's good, that's amazing. People work a lot of years to do that. So it needs to be more from a position of support than often it's from a position of gloat, and it's from a position of status, and it's not a status thing. University, your career shouldn't be a status thing. It shouldn't be a keeping up with the Joneses thing. It should be something that that young person decides, and you support.
Yeah, and don't you have a podcast for parents? That's where I saw you popping up on the LinkedIn this morning again. And don't you have a podcast for parents? Is that new?
So we launched that.
You're realising there.
Yeah. So we launched that a few months ago. So it's called The Parent Perspectives, on all the same places you can listen to this, by YouTube. But we'll be going on YouTube at some point. The whole idea was to give parents careers information, because there's not a lot of resources for parents. We're guilty of it. Hold my hands up. We're guilty of it too, not putting out enough resource for parents. I think everyone in this space can hold their hands up and say we can always do more. But it's a little thing of a bigger project. Do you know what I mean? Parents is one of those things that every year, when I look at our strategy of growth, parents needs to be in that. We need to consistently market and engage this audience, because it will always, it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing project, and the parent perspective will be part of that ongoing project.
Yeah, and students are bombarded with so much in education, aren't they? Because there is so much out there. It's hard for them to dissect and go, well, I need to tell my family about this. I need to tell my family about that. And they can't always do that when guest speakers are coming in left, right, and centre, and pamphlets are being handed out, and open days are like every day, aren't they, for a certain period of the year. So that's a great resource that you're providing to parents. So nice one on that. And I wanted to ask you one last question, if that's all right, which I haven't prepped you for. And that's going back to, say, 16, 17, maybe 18-year-old Conor. If you could give yourself a little bit of advice back then that you wish somebody had given you, or you wish that you had taken on maybe as a mantra, is there anything that's kind of happened since then, things that have gone right, things that haven't gone to plan? What advice would you give yourself for, say, 17-year-old Conor?
Don't be afraid to take risks, I think is the biggest thing. I've been, I've kind of throughout my career taken some mini risks, some bigger risks. It was a risk to leave Springpod when I did. It was a risk to leave not going to uni when I did the first time. It was a risk to go into the big bad world without a full-time job and didn't really know what I was doing. I've taken risks in terms of our business, in terms of how we grow, and they always say nothing grows from your comfort zone, and there's a shed loads of cheesy quotes I could say right now, but don't be afraid to take calculated risks in your career and in your journey, because people, I think there's always a misconception. I'm only 22. I'm the managing director of a company, but I'm very young. Like I can, I've still got time on my side, and people forget that, so take risks whilst you can, whilst you haven't got the mortgage behind you or the kids or this or that. Like, you can afford to take these risks and you can afford to try new things. You don't need to have your life made by 30. There's a really horrible misconception in the world that, by 30 in this day and age, because of Instagram and social media, like, you need to have a wife, have a kid, have a house, you need to have $1 million in the bank and own a load of NFTs and do this and do that. And actually, do you? Because, you look at historically, most millionaires didn't make their millions until 40 plus. And, there's a lot of things out there. So whilst you're young, enjoy it, take risks. And remember that time's on your side, more importantly.
Brilliant. Conor, thank you so much. And thanks for sharing what you do at Not Going to Uni. It's been great to really dive a bit deeper into it from just the surface that I normally see, or that we normally see as students and educators. Stay on the line if you've got a minute or two. But for now, I'm going to say thank you so much for talking business. Really appreciate it. And for everybody else, go check out Not Going to Uni. And we'll see you all again on Talking Business with Danny Pardo. Thanks very much, Conor, and bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Conor, thank you so much for taking the time out of your ridiculously busy schedule to talk with me here on Talking Business with Danny Pardo. Really do appreciate your time, and I have no doubt that our paths will be crossing many times as we move forward with both our careers. So, Conor, thank you, and all the best to you and your team there at Not Going to Uni, and to everybody else, a big thank you as well. I appreciate the new likes, subscribers, ratings, reviews. Really appreciate those reviews. And you can say hi on all the social medias that you can find. I appreciate it. And until next time, thank you and cheerio.